People are losing their minds on social media because Klay unfollowed the Warriors on all of his social media. It's a common thing now for athletes to do when they're frustrated and not happy with their contract.
Klay Thompson finally did it. He declared war on the only team that he's ever played for in his entire NBA career. And at this point, it would make more sense for him to leave than him to stay. So before we get to the content, make sure you drop like, subscribe, and turn on our notifications to help us make this push to 1 million subscribers. Now that we get all that out of the way, cue the intro. Today's video is sponsored by SeatGeek. Summer is officially here, which means NFL season is right around the corner. I'm personally hoping that I could watch my Dallas Cowboys disappoint me in person, and there's no better way to get tickets at a fairer price than by using SeatGeek. That's why I need to tell you about my special hookup from today's sponsor, SeatGeek. Everyone can use my promo code FlightMike10 and get 10% off of any tickets on SeatGeek, whether you're a new customer or not. Sports, concerts, festivals, you name it. And every ticket is backed by their buyer guarantee, and SeatGeek is the only site that lets you return tickets ahead of the event with swaps. Now, no matter how many times you bought tickets on SeatGeek before, use my promo code FlightMike10 to get 10% off of your next order. So take out your phone, open the SeatGeek app, and add code FlightMike10 to your account. What are you waiting for? Do it now because this offer is only available for a limited time. And thank you, SeatGeek, for the sponsor. Mic check 1 2 1 2. What's going on, everybody? Do you guys remember when Klay Thompson stated that he was expecting a maximum contract with the Golden State Warriors?
What do we know about the contractual situation for Klay Thompson going forward?
Especially with Klay Thompson, who I'm told has an expectation that he would be rewarded with a new max level contract extension.
This is a huge reason why longtime Golden State Warriors general manager Bob Myers decided to leave the Warriors to begin with.
What is the path forward for Klay Thompson in Golden State?
Well, this is why I left, first of all. A lot of times people will say it's just business, but this is not a just business situation. He was instrumental in bringing 4 championships. So it's not so simple as it's money and years. This is why it was hard for me. You get relationships with these people, especially if you've succeeded with them. And that core has been together for 12 years. And that's just so rare now. It just doesn't happen. And so this is a delicate negotiation. From what I know and see, he wants to stay. They want him to stay. Doesn't mean it'll happen. But it is a test. It's certainly a test. This is probably the first real test.
You see, before the collective bargaining agreement changed, everything was moving swimmingly for the Golden State Warriors. All they had to do was build around the big three of Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, and Draymond Green. They had plenty of depth off of the bench. They made excellent decisions like trading for Andrew Bogut, trading for Andre Iguodala, taking a chance on Sean Livingston, drafting Harrison Barnes. And right when things couldn't get any better, the salary cap boomed, and it allowed the Golden State Warriors to sign Kevin Durant to a max contract. Things couldn't get any better for a team like the Warriors, which is why the new collective bargaining agreement did the most it possibly could to make sure this never happens again. Before, the NBA would punish teams severely for forming big threes, and if you take a look at the current NBA landscape, more often than not, the big three tends to fail. Whether it's the Phoenix Suns this past year, when they decided to gut out all of their depth and go all in on Kevin Durant and Bradley Beal, or if it was the Los Angeles Clippers who were just looking for some additional options for the event that Kawhi Leonard gets injured. Building a big three hasn't worked in the NBA for a while, but now even having a big two in the NBA might cost you severely. The only team that is executing it perfectly so far is the Boston Celtics, but that's only because only one of their stars is getting paid a supermax contract currently in Jaylen Brown. Once Jason Tatum enters free agency as a NBA champion, you could best believe that the Boston Celtics are going to make him the highest paid player in NBA history. And in years past, there would be a single tax apron, which was a limit to how much teams could spend above the salary cap and luxury tax line without having to pay added penalties that would bring in other restrictions. But as of last year, there's a a second tax apron, which is a brand new threshold. Currently, it's at about $11 million above the first apron, and while first apron teams are banned from signing a player that is waived during the regular season if his salary exceeds that year's mid-level exception, the second apron repercussions are insane. Teams above that threshold would lose any mid-level exception entirely, but they're also prohibited from combining multiple player salaries in trades as well, which means the prime candidate in this case is the Phoenix Suns. They wouldn't be able to trade Yusuf Nurkic and Nasir Little for one player making $24.8 million. They can't utilize trade exceptions, and they can't send cash considerations over so they could get trades done. And it gets even crazier. If you're in the second apron by the end of next year's season, you'll automatically have your 2032 first round pick frozen and unable to deal, which is a big deal because that's how the Milwaukee Bucks got Damian Lillard to begin with. And it even gets crazier. If a team remains in the second apron for 2 of the following 4 seasons, its first round pick 7 years out won't just be frozen, it'll automatically get moved to the end of the first round, which is absolutely insane because typically these capped out teams are the teams that are going to go to the end of the first round. Now, why am I bringing all of this up? Well, it's because the game has completely changed. You can't just go out and all willy-nilly hand Klay Thompson a max contract just because you're feeling sentimental. But fortunately, the Warriors had this problem before. They dealt with this exact same issue last year with Draymond Green. Draymond Green was flirting with a multitude of teams. He was flirting with the idea of playing for the Sacramento Kings. He was flirting with the idea of going to Los Angeles and playing with this sweet, sweet king, even though the fit there was a little questionable to say the least. But when the moment free agency began, Draymond Green understood the game changed, and he signed with the Golden State Warriors on a 4-year, $100 million contract, which is not even close to a max contract. But Draymond Green understood that this is how it's going to be in the NBA now. So throughout this entire season, Klay Thompson had only one mission and one mission only: prove to the Golden State Warriors that he was worthy of a max contract. The problem is Klay Thompson pretty much did the exact opposite of that. And I don't want to make it sound like I'm bad-mouthing Klay, because in my opinion, he is one of the greatest shooters in NBA history. There's a legitimate argument for him being the second greatest shooter in NBA history. He's part of one of the greatest backcourts in NBA history, and has the hard way to prove it. In my opinion, Klay could have retired after tearing his ACL, and he still would have been enshrined in the Hall of Fame based off of the performances he's given us. But even after that, he came off of a torn ACL and a torn Achilles tendon and helped the Golden State Warriors win another championship. And a lot of people tend to forget that Klay Thompson isn't the same version of himself anymore. Klay is currently 34 years old. He's set to turn 35 next February. He's playing on a repaired ACL and a repaired Achilles tendon. One of the best parts of Klay Thompson as a player was he was one of the best two-way guards in the game. But following his Achilles tear and his ACL tear, obviously he lost a step in that regard. He still could shoot the lights out and still shot 39% from 3 over this past year, but he clearly wasn't the same player that was able to give Kawhi Leonard some trouble during the 2019 NBA Finals. He's more of a defensive liability now, and to be honest, that's what to be expected from a 34-year-old Klay Thompson. And throughout the year we saw this negotiation was weighing heavily on Klay Thompson, because as early as November of 2023, Kendra Andrews mentioned that he appears to be noticeably more frustrated during games. He sometimes sits on the end of the bench by himself during timeouts, or he slaps his head after taking a bad shot. I can't blame Klay, because this is your final contract, and if you play horribly, you might play your way out of a good contract. And unfortunately for Klay Thompson, that would happen. A few weeks later, he called out a reporter for insinuating that he should be benched.
Kurt talks a lot about believing in his guys, especially the starting lineup, having patience, letting guys kind of, find their game. How aware are you of that kind of patience, and how much do you value it?
What do you want me to bench me?
No. It's like that's.
You want to bench Wiggs?
I don't think I said that.
I mean, you can suggest it, it's fine. But, I mean, thanks, Steve, I guess. I don't know. Sometimes you earn these things like patience and time to find yourself. And I think history is on our side when it comes to that stuff.
You say that. Have you heard people say that, or?
No, I don't care what people say.
And this would be foreshadowing for Klay Thompson, because Brandon Podziemski was clearly the better man to play in the starting five for the Golden State Warriors. And Klay Thompson initially didn't take this benching very well.
Now you get to Klay Thompson. Oh boy, when it's bad for Klay, it's bad. He was bricking, wide open, with guys at his face, and that's not going away either. So what do you do with Klay?
A healthy Klay Thompson was benched in crunch time. Sometimes tough for a guy to take when you're doing it for the first time. So the seal has been broken, right? Like, I think Steve Kerr has now made it possible that, hey, I can bench Klay Thompson in crunch time, which you didn't know how he was going to handle it. He was not pleased last night. It sounded like the broadcast, he was, kind of stammering around the bench. Steph at one point kind of had to pull him away. He was yelling towards the bench. It didn't seem like it was anybody in particular he was yelling at, I'm sure. But, he was making his opinions felt. Then he walked over and he hit something on the bench, and kind of like, it looked like a cup rack or something went flying behind the bench.
Oh boy.
It was clearly the end of an era for the Golden State Warriors. But to Klay Thompson's credit, he actually embraced the benching pretty well.
You could do two things. You could pout, or you can go out there and respond, and I thought I did the latter very well tonight. More importantly, I realized I'm going to play a ton of minutes, so you just got to let the ego go when you think of coming off the bench and all that. I mean, I embraced it, and I think that really let my guard down and let me just be myself out there. The moment you worry about what people say or what headlines will be written about being benched or the streak being broken is when you go out there and you don't play with that love, that compassion for your teammates, and that freedom that has gotten me to this point. So
this made things significantly more complicated for Klay Thompson and the Golden State Warriors, because clearly he's not the same version of himself. But typically when you have a player that's contributed to your culture the way Klay Thompson has, and a player that's missed out on some big paydays. I mean, I understand it's easy to look at Klay Thompson and the fact that he earned a 5-year, $190 million contract during 2019. And I know it's easy to look at this contract and say, Mike, this is an incredible contract, especially considering the fact that he tore his ACL and was out for a year, and the Warriors still signed him to this contract. But at the same time, Klay Thompson didn't make it to the All-NBA first team throughout his career, so he was never eligible for a Supermax contract, which is something he really wanted. Now, I know it sounds absolutely ludicrous to say that Klay Thompson was trying to get even more money despite tearing his ACL, but this is something that actually frustrated him prior to his ACL being torn. So in his mind, he probably thinks he left a lot of money on the table, but despite this, he mentioned multiple times that he still wants to play with the Golden State Warriors, but he feels blessed regardless of the future. And if he decides to leave, then there's no question about it. I don't think there's a player that's ever had a worse final game for a team than Klay Thompson and the Golden State Warriors. In a crucial play-in game against a team that he's torched multiple times in years past, Klay Thompson went 0 for 10 versus the Sacramento Kings. It was the perfect way to go out considering the season that Klay Thompson had. Nothing exemplified the type of season that Klay Thompson had than this final game. Things felt weird, things felt uncomfortable, and he was lost in terms of where he was as a player. He clearly wasn't the same version of himself as he was before, and that's okay. Despite this, Steve Kerr gave Klay Thompson a huge endorsement once the season concluded.
How difficult was it for you to see him struggle like that, given everything he kind of fought through this season, to have a very good second half, to see it end like that? What was that like for you?
It's tough. It's tough. I love Klay so much. I mean, what he's meant to me in the 10 years we've been together. I've watched him the last couple of years, fighting the feeling of devastation from the injuries. And I've watched him this year really flip his season around with his approach and play with a little more freedom, a little more joy. So tonight was tough to see him struggle. But as I told the guys in there, that's all part of being an athlete and being an NBA player. There's incredible highs and really tough lows, and this was a tough one for Klay and for the whole team, and it hurts, so it's all part of it.
And I think that's a beautiful way to look at it, but at the end of the day, you have to remember there's a reason why Bob Myers left. I personally think Klay Thompson should be brought back, but if you bring back Klay Thompson on a max contract just to thank him for what he's done for the Warriors, then there's virtually no chance of this team competing moving forward. And I'm sure even Klay Thompson understands that. It's nothing personal, and in my opinion, the Golden State Warriors already thanked Klay Thompson for his achievements during the last contract they gave him. Klay pretty much got to sit out for 2 years and collect generational wealth wealth and then come back and help his team win a championship. It's clearly not what he wanted, but it's what ended up happening. And now it seems like he's playing a much different game going into this offseason. This seems to be like the new norm, but Klay Thompson took it to a brand new level here. A few days ago, Klay officially unfollowed the Golden State Warriors on social media. Not only did he unfollow the Golden State Warriors on social media, but he also deleted every single Golden State Warriors related post from his account. Now, I wanted to say that we've seen this happen so many times before. It's a relatively new negotiating tactic that players like to take whenever they're entering free agency. And here's Draymond Green's reaction on it.
I know all of you were probably looking forward to me talking about Klay unfollowing the Warriors and deleting some IG posts or something. I had no idea that happened. I think it's fucking hilarious. Just so y'all know, I laughed when I logged on here and Jackson's like, yo, so what about Klay? I'm like, what? Like, what happened? He's like, oh, he unfollowed the Warriors. I think that's comical. I know you all be wanting like somebody's feelings to be hurt or something. It ain't that, ain't never gonna be that. That's hilarious.
And Klay didn't stop there. He started stirring the pot even more so when he followed Paolo Banchero on Instagram and then posted this picture of him in Florida shooting hoops saying, I miss this place so much. Man, if this wasn't calculated, I don't know what is. Now look, could Klay Thompson be angling for more money from the Golden State Warriors? Yeah, most definitely. I mean, this is what you're supposed to do when you're entering your free agency period. But is there a good chance Klay Thompson leaves to the Orlando Magic? Most definitely. If you take a look at the role that Klay Thompson played for the Golden State Warriors this past year and just the season that he had with the Warriors this past year, I personally think that there are greener pastures waiting for him in Orlando if he was to go to Orlando, or maybe the Dallas Mavericks if he wants to play with Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving. First, the Orlando Magic would be willing to pay him significantly more money than the Golden State Warriors would, and this is in Florida where there is zero state income tax. You'll also be moving from the extremely competitive Western Conference all the way to the Eastern Conference, where there are some good teams there, but obviously it's significantly weaker than the West. Look, this is nothing against the East, and I do think the gap between the Boston Celtics and the rest of the East is sizable depending on how much ground the Milwaukee Bucks make up next year and what the Miami Heat do in the offseason, or if the Cavaliers make a huge move and trade Donovan Mitchell or Darius Garland, or if the Philadelphia 76ers could get healthy. But when you take a look at the Western Conference, I mean, the OKC Thunder had no business being this good this quickly. This was Chet Holmgren's rookie season and they became a first seed. The Minnesota Timberwolves finally figured it out and they were the 3 seed. That's before we get to the Denver Nuggets, who are a very difficult 2 seed, and that's primarily because they lost some of their depth from their championship season. And then you get to the Los Angeles Clippers, who are a super team, and maybe they get weaker, maybe they lose Paul George. The Dallas Mavericks are the defending Western Conference champions. The Phoenix Suns have Kevin Durant, Devin Booker, and Bradley Beal. The Houston Rockets made a huge run at the end of the season, and the San Antonio Spurs are primed to make a huge trade and practically become unstoppable with Victor Wembanyama. And then you have the Golden State Warriors, who in the very best case scenario might be able to get Paul George or DeMar DeRozan, and they're supposed to compete with all of these teams that are consistently improving year after year after year. I just don't see it happening. You could make significantly more money and have a better opportunity to win a championship if you make the move to the Eastern Conference. And if you don't win a championship with the Orlando Magic, which, you know, the jury's out on whether or not that could be done, at the very minimum, you're making significantly more money to go over to Orlando to be more competitive than you would be in the Western Conference. I think the Golden State Warriors and the Los Angeles Lakers are those teams that are probably going to be competing for a play-in spot next year. And that's their very ceiling. And this is coming from a diehard Laker fan and a guy that really respects the Warriors. But there's just too much ground to make up on these other top Western Conference teams. And I just don't see a point for Klay Thompson to stay on the Golden State Warriors, make less money, just because he's feeling a little sentimental. But what didn't make me feel as sentimental as this is seeing what Delonte West is currently going through. This man was once LeBron James's starting shooting guard, and he had some very difficult times and became homeless. Mark Cuban tried to help him and things got a little bit better, but now unfortunately things have taken a turn for the worst. I think it's important that we bring you guys this update on Delonte West. I'll leave a link to that in the end screen and I'll catch you guys there. I'm your boy Mike, and I'm dropping our mic until our next upload.